Vacha. So, in which the Shishya says, even though I have no more duties to perform here, yet there remains something to be done. And that is the devoted service at the lotus feet of my Guru, by whose grace alone I have gained this self-knowledge. So there was some discussion when we were interpreting this verse about the paradox that exists, because in the very previous verse, or in the one or two previous verses, where the Shishya says, after having reached the state of oneness with the source, with the truth, I have no more duties to perform. And in this verse here he says that though I have no more duties to perform, I have still something to do, something to be done. So the interpretation that we have to notice, or we have to take into cognition here, is that all the duties that the disciple recognizes as no more duties to be done are duties that are driven by what is called as the function of one's existence, the role of one's existence. So in the role of one's existence, we have different functions and different relations, and based on all of that, there are duties that are enjoined upon such an individual to perform to progress through life. What happens when the disciple or the spiritual seeker attains the state of realization? When such a person attains the state of realization and is established in it, both attaining and being established, such that it does not leave that individual, the sense of duty, the sense of need for duty goes away. The effect, or the choiceless performance of duty might still stay. For example, when you try to see the lives of great Mahatmas, whether it is individuals whom we can call as Janma Siddha, that means by birth they know that they are liberated, or if you take the case of individuals who made a serious seeking and then attained the state of oneness, you will notice in them that they don't suddenly become completely withdrawn from the world, as if to say they deny the existence of whatever was related to their name and form. It is not like that. Even the greatest of greatest Mahatmas have always recognized that they had a family and they had accountabilities, they had roles, and though it was not to fulfill a role, but when the role called for, they did their role. There are many examples like this. One of my favorite examples is that of Adi Shankaracharya. At the age of 6, he took sannyas and then left. His mother took a promise from him that you are a sannyasi, I am no longer your mother, because you have now burnt all your previous attachments and you have done even what is known as Atma Shraddha. That means you perform all the activities that your progeny should perform for you, you will perform it yourself. All of that has been done, yet you need to promise me one. So he said, what is it? He said, in my last days, you should come and be with me. That means I should die in your presence, or my death should be taken care of by you, or whatever. That kind of a promise she took. And Shankaracharya agreed to it. So one can say, if he was self-realized, how did he bind himself with that duty? So it is not that such a self-realized master does not have duties or does not care for duties. It is that the duty is not born out of some choice they make by themselves for its fulfillment, the duty fulfillment. So Shankaracharya doesn't make this choice. For him, it was the wish of his mother which was binding on him, and that alone remained as the condition in which he would reappear on the banks of Kaladi to perform the last rites of his mother. Now, as per Sannyasa Dharma, this is also not permitted. But Adi Shankaracharya showed us why and how it needs to be done, and also the fact that even when another great sannyasi like Tejamananji will contribute to this poem Jnana Saar and mention that there are no duties, he is not radically refusing to say that there is nothing to perform. There are things to perform, but with no vested interest. And in other Mahatmas' lives also we notice this. For example, in the life of Raman Maharishi, once he left his hometown, wherever he lived in Madurai when he got his state of self-realization, and he left that place for good. And he appeared and settled down or started living in Arunachala in Tiruvannamalai. So then in stages, people from his previous life or with his when he was a young boy, they appeared to convince him to return to Madurai. One can say if he has become self-realized, he has no more duties, he won't recognize his people. Actually, he recognized his people. It is not that he said, I don't know who you are. It is not like that. He recognized them. But he had no more any interest to go back. That is all. And that is what he expressed. That interest which would have been born out of desire driven role fulfillment, that interest is completely, it completely leaves such an individual who has attained the state of self-realization. However, depending on conditions and depending on needs, they would still continue to perform their roles. And it will appear to us, in many cases it will appear to us that they are quite deeply vested in that role. But I would say that that vesting, what you say, is more because their involvement is never incomplete. In whatever they get involved completely. So even in the life of Raman Maharishi, he was a great cook in the sense that he had a great sense of taste and he was extremely efficient in making recipes. In whatever he cooked, it was fantastic, always fantastic. So one would say maybe he likes eating, but actually that is not the purpose. The purpose is he always felt that when you do this cooking work, you have to do it with all your interest and might, because finally the people who savor that food or who will partake of that food should get the benefit of your your work that you perform. So one of his favorite activities in the Ramana ashram, if you say duty, he took it upon himself like a duty. At a specific time in the day, before lunchtime, 3 hours or 2 hours before lunchtime, he will go to the kitchen. Along with the kitchen staff, he will sit and cut vegetables. So this used to be his standard routine. So someone might say, if a self-realized person has no duties, how is Raman Maharshi performing duties? So that is how we need to take that statement. And in this statement, there is something extraordinarily subtle. And that subtle aspect of the individual student is the student forever completely dissolves his identification with all the earlier conditions through which the student has passed through and the relational complexities that existed. But the simplest of relationships he always had as a disciple was what is called as the Guru-Shishya relation. And why is it so simple? Because there is no expectation from the Guru and there is no expectation from the disciple, and the communication between the disciple and the student is almost very basic, because they are only communicating or pointing towards the truth. And all that the disciple does is try to absorb what the teacher has communicated and remain resilient to that teaching. So this is the only relationship between the disciple and the teacher. To that, the disciple owes the highest level of gratitude. Now, how should the disciple then express his gratitude? So for that, this verse is composed by Tejamananji, saying that though I have no more duties to perform, the only thing that I need to do all through my life and for the remaining part of my life is to remain doggedly, resiliently serving the master, or if the master passes, serving the master's, let us say, the urn of ashes, master's photograph, master's idol. So their only purpose remains that. Without that, their life remains incomplete. And this has been also demonstrated by all the teachers, all the Mahatmas that we know of in recent times. And this is not only the Mahatmas who belong to the Hindu tradition. You take any Mahatma from any tradition. whether you take Sufi tradition, Christian tradition, any other, any Buddhist, anything, everyone remains resiliently focused on their service to Master. So that is what is the last verse. Then in the Kenopanishad preface, we looked at two questions. The apparent conflict or the contest between religion and science, and how is that the science of Vedanta is different from conventional religion. Now, from time immemorial, in a way, so from the time we have been seeing the modern, modern period, which is recorded in history, known to people, discussed on platforms in universities and colleges, etc., is that there seems to be a development towards what is called as the scientific age, which tends to challenge, or which tended to challenge, the traditional religious and the church, religious thought and the church. Now, this religious thought and church was predominantly, the contest was predominantly European. Why wasn't there such a contest in Hindu civilization or Indian civilization? Is because the scientific evolution and the scientific thought predates almost simultaneously with the spiritual thought. So scientific thought did not become an opposition to spiritual thought, it became a co-traveler to spiritual thought. So this co-traveler part of the process of spirituality and scientific approach becomes the reason why Vedanta is referred to as the science of Vedanta. And this was a quote of Swami Vivekananda, who said the religion of universal brotherhood is Vedanta. He didn't say Hinduism, he said Vedanta. And why he said the religion of universal brotherhood is Vedanta is purely from the fact that the approach in Vedanta has got all the flavor which a rational process can be taken forward, just as it would have been taken forward in science. Though there are some subtle differences, which is what we are going to try to unpack and unravel as we go through the introduction. Then the last bit of the commentary was on the Vedas, the outline of the Vedas, and how or what is the part that is called Upanishad, and in the Kenopanishad, what is it that is being spoken of. So that was what we had briefly covered. So the part about the Vedas, that it has three parts, mantra, brahmana, and then the end of it, Aranyaka. In the Aranyaka there is the Upanishad, and there are a classification in modern times of some principal Upanishads, which is those Upanishads upon which the great Acharyas have commented, and some minor Upanishads upon which some other disciples of the great Acharyas commented. So like that there are some classifications. But in general, the idea of an Upanishad is the science and the principles of going for what is called as the subjective search, to go to the core of what is called as the source of the identification, or the source of what we call as the self and what we experience as the self, to go to that source and to remain embedded in that source such that the effects of illusion are completely let go of. And the word effects of illusion is a very spiritual statement, because the condition what we call as the accepted world, or the world that I accept as it exists, that what we call as accepted is treated as the illusory world. And what is not accepted and not understood, not seen, not recognized, is considered to be the truth. Therefore, this search is subjective and not objective. So scientific approach is objective search, spiritual approach is subjective search. So that is the basic difference, and the Upanishad gives us that. So then we can now go into the introduction to the Upanishad, if there are no other questions on the previous, towards the highest truth. And towards the end there is an interesting story, and that is considered to be the Kenopanishad story. And we have referred to this, that end story of Kenopanishad has come up in some other texts that we have done already. So when we come to that bit of the mantra, we'll come to know that it is something that we already have heard. Okay. So in this introduction, some of the topics that Swamiji has elaborated as subheadings, they will enable us to recall and to revise some of our thinking. And this recall and revise is quite significant, quite important, because that will enable us to be ready for what is to come. It is like how in cricket we say, taking from the umpire, the batsman will consider the middle wicket or the leg wicket or the off stump, middle stump, leg stump or the off stump, crease, taking crease. So you have to take your crease and be alert at that place. Otherwise, you will not be able to face the bowler. So the mantras that will come, to be able to understand it in the light of some proper readiness, this initial bit of commentary is useful. Okay, so the first question is, how is it explained that religion is the privilege of a full-grown man? What are the questions such a man would ask and why? The ask question is simple, but why is what I wanted you to reflect on.
Kind of it's, but tomorrow you lose again. So what is the big deal about it?
Yeah, and also this aspect about that philosophy can actually create a chaos and you can get muddled in philosophy is a very important aspect, because a lot of Western philosophers have done deep dive into philosophy and got completely trapped in the, what I call as verbiage of philosophy, and then found life meaningless and then committed suicide. This is common in Western philosophers. But what is the difference between the English word philosophy and the teaching of the Upanishad? I found the answer to this question just accidentally. I had ordered books of Eknath Easwaran almost a year back, and it had come by courier, by physical courier, because the books of Eknath Easwaran were quite expensive in pounds. So I ordered and asked a friend to bring it from India. So he brought it and gave it to his kid who's studying in London and said, you collect it from her. It just remained there. I kept telling Titiksha to get it. She couldn't get it. Finally, she got it this time. And in that, he gives this answer and he says, philosophy is very similar to worldly scientific understanding. That means it is objective. There's Rene Descartes said, I think so, I am because I think, or I think therefore I am. So all of which is almost not going to the subject, but just looking at what is happening, what is externally focused. So he says Vedanta, Eknath Easwaran says, Vedanta doesn't talk like that. Vedanta says philosophy, the word philosophy is darshan. And darshan, when you really look at it etymologically, means to see, to know, to experience directly without a medium. That is darshan. So the word philosophy is a Western word, is an English word, which doesn't translate into the goal of darshana, the goal of Upanishadic teachings. The goal of Upanishadic teachings is not to manifest it itself into words, is not to manifest itself into an understanding or a piece of knowledge that you can acquire and hold on to. It is not something of that nature. Then what is its true nature? Its true nature is, we have often discussed this, the true nature of that type of teaching is only to act like a pointer. The goal is afar. It is only a pointer. And the pointer is of no use because the goal is what we need to go to. Therefore, it is referred to as darshan. That means to see or to gain a complete, absorption in. That is why Upanishadic knowledge will not lead one into what is called as psychological, chaotic word, mesh or a word web, because it will ultimately translate itself into something which is very simple, direct, and here and now. When it gets translated and when it gets absorbed at that level, in that depth, then the student starts making very rapid progress. Therefore, for Hindu philosophy, It is never said, read more and more. Hindu philosophy is always said, practice more and more. So you will say, but their books are so many, it will take so many years to read all those. So it doesn't matter. You keep reading them, but you increase the practice that you are doing, because the reading is not going to take you to the truth. The practice is going to take you to the truth. So that is the difference between the idea that the questions will arise, but we don't remain stuck in questions. We go towards where the question is prompting me. So when we ask the question, who am I? Some answer will come. When I ask, where did I come from? Some answer will come. We are not going to get stuck in the question or the answer.
That's what triggers the real questioning.
Yeah, quite possible. Because if you see how the fabric of the ashrama dharma in Hindu tradition or in traditional Hindu way of life is structured, the last phase of life towards seeking the highest is called sannyasa. And sannyasa is makes the Maslow's need hierarchy stand on its tip. So for a person pursuing sannyasa dharma, he will say, I don't need security of food, I don't need security of home, I don't need security of relationship. I want to burn all the three securities, and I am going to be content by burning all the three. And then I will begin my journey, my inward journey, that is not really self-actualization, because the self-actualization reinforces the self which is fictitious. What does spiritual search do? Spiritual search takes you to the core or the source of what is called as the arising of the self. So therefore it is a reverse inverted triangle, and actually speaking, when a person says that I am in full-time spiritual search, this idea of tyaga, which we also discussed earlier when we were doing Jnana Saar, the idea of tyaga in Sanskrit would mean detachment. 100% or total detachment is a prerequisite in spiritual search. Then the question comes, whom do we or what do we detach from? We detach from all the preset patterns that exist in our mind. So preset patterns will include all of the Maslow's need hierarchy, the bottom up pyramid. So if you detach from all of it, all you're remaining with is your final questions. So the last few questions which Swamiji places there, and he says these are spiritual questions, the person in search of truth goes away with those questions. So when you say Gautama the prince left his home, what were the questions that triggered him, or what were the questions he had in his heart which allowed him to make his seeking for the next 8 years or whatever time he was a seeker? Were these questions. There was no question regarding what will his meal be. There was no question regarding where will his house be. There was no question regarding who will take care of me if I am ill. Nothing. The only 4 or 5 questions he had in his mind were these fundamental questions. Therefore, you have to understand that spiritual search will not have a time when it arises. But when it arises and when it intensifies, only few questions are required. Not many. In the case of Raman Maharishi, he said not even many, only one question. He said only the question of who am I? So if you get that bit, which is what one would call as the absorbing search, then that is, it is a total thing. And one of the recent teachers like Gary Weber, he calls these search questions do-it-yourself questions. He says you don't need an examiner to examine and raise a question paper to answer it. This is what you will raise to yourself and you will inquire. So it's all do-it-yourself.
But he was only 15, and so you don't have to be a fully grown man, as it says in this.
Yeah, the idea of fully grown is actually not physical growth. It is what one would call as the spiritual growth of the individual towards truth. Now, throughout the Vedantic teachings, the spiritual growth is the reverse of a cocoon. That means if you have multiple layers around the caterpillar, you can call all the layers as the bondings or the bindings that keep you trapped in the semi-grown man or the animal person. And then as you keep shedding off these layers of bonds and bondages, you are ready to unleash your potential towards the spiritual query. So when are you ready? This is what Mala was saying. Some people can get readied quite early in life. So you would say that they may be divinely blessed. And all the Mahatmas, whoever have been asked this question, they have said yes, some people are divinely blessed. So they will unleash this potential very early. And for others, it will just come whenever it has to come. In the case of Ramesh Balshekar, he used to say, the moment you will start asking a question regarding the comfortable state of your life and say, I have not found some answers, he says, now you're ready for spirituality. Because what is then happening is, you're no longer asking, how much more comfort do I need? You're saying, this is not giving me answers. And this was again Gautama's question. Before he became a seeker as Buddha, his question was, all this plentiness of the palace, the comfort of the kingdom, etc., isn't really something worth asking questions about. That seems like a given. But there are some serious questions which I haven't tackled. And the moment this arises, he becomes a seeker. So that's the state in which the idea of fully grown would relate like that, saying that you're growing inward rather than growing in the needs, fulfilling needs, etc. Anytime the needs can just drop off. It's of no consequence at all. Are you responding to a real urgent need? They can be also an urgent need. So most often you will see that you're a victim not of an urgent need, you're a victim of the desire that is arising towards whatever is your pursuit. So that is your inner traits, and those are the layers which are actually sometimes weak and sometimes strong. So when some teachers were so what I will say kind to the disciple, that they would caution the disciple in advance that you are likely to succumb, please be careful. And sometimes the teachers would be also so gracious to remove the obstacles even before you have felt that you have succumbed. So there are so many such narratives surrounding teachers and surrounding disciples that the more you reflect on that, the more you will start saying that probably this is not something that I need to too strongly give it some credibility. So all you need to do is be focused on whatever you're making it as a search and a seeking, and call for the help of your guru or teacher as and when required, not really cognitively asking, just effectively saying that the guru is going to help no matter whether I seek it or not going to seek it. So that is bound to happen, because the spiritual journey is one such journey. It is almost like being carried along the journey. That is what we learned in that last verse of the Jnana Saar, where the disciple says that at many places it felt as if I was not making the seeking. It was only you who had the capacity to take me to the truth. There was no other way I could have gone to the truth. So that is the almost physical, psychological condition that the disciple feels when he thinks of his teacher. Okay.
Just a
Going
quick
to a
point.
person's story, which is again a classical story. There was a guru of Shivaji by the name Samarth Ramdas. And in Maharashtrian tradition, when you get married, there are some mantras which are chanted. And then the mantras, when the mantras end, the chorus in the audience will be the word Savdhan, become alert. And how that tradition has come up is, in those mantras, something regarding marital harmony is being spelt out. So they are trying to bring the couple, the wife and the husband who are now getting married, to be alert to those mantras. When Samarth Ramdas was getting married, he was just a boy of something like 12 or 13. Child marriage was common. When he heard Savadhan, he was already well prepared spiritually. He didn't take it as the Savadhan to attend to the mantra. He took it that this whole process, the people are warning me about what this process is going to take you into. So he thought that they have told me, Savadhan, don't get into this. So he just jumps out of the window and runs away. So that is the story of how Samarth Ramdas took sannyas. So he didn't finally listen to any mantra. One who is in the lower order of life, who hasn't attained the highest goal. If this is our basic assumption, which is the reason why Western concept of Maslow's need hierarchy has to be washed from our brains and thrown out of the window. So this is my fundamental premise. If you hold on to that theory, then it becomes very difficult to understand why in a poor potter's family someone can be awakened for the highest state of search, and why that poor potter never stopped being a potter. He kept going for his highest search in spite of being a potter. Then the question comes, does pottery contribute to his highest search, or does the highest search arise automatically? So in my opinion, Maslow's needs hierarchy is a theoretical construct which is possible if you don't want to look at the spiritual question. So if you say a person only lives like just like fulfilling needs and fulfilling desires, and in that there is a progression. If that is the entire analysis, it is okay. But if you posit this idea that there is a spiritual question that can arise, it can arise at any stage, no matter what is your condition in your hierarchy model. And as Patricia pointed out, there can be a catharsis moment in your basic needs. If you are put into starvation for a week, a spiritual question can arise, and that can become the goal of your life. So you will say, oh, my basic needs have been prohibited, then spiritual question arose. It can. It is just that question, it is just a point where a catharsis may be needed. It can arise from any point. So the question that should this be a urge, the answer is cannot be answered, because should would mean sociological or political or a bureaucratic choice. So you say, should I follow rules? Should I follow law? So these are shoulds. Vedanta and spirituality is not a should. Vedanta and spirituality is literally a could for everyone. And it is equally open. And that it is equally open is actually so transparent. When you attend Vipassana camp in India, so Vipassana camps are always free. So there are no charges. So when you finish the camp, there are all kinds of people who have attended. And since you have attended in silence, you don't know who is coming with what background. So someone can be a very wealthy person now, spiritual question has got awakened, you have come to a Vipassana camp. And I was totally surprised when an old lady spoke to me on the last day of the camp. The ladies are in one section and gents are in one section. An old lady from the other section comes and meets me, and while we are standing in the bookstall or some place where there was some donations being collected. And then she says, who are you and where did you come from? So I told my background, and obviously she had no clue because she seemed completely rustic. She apparently came only with one cloth, that means whatever dress she was wearing, a sari, and one spare. And she was using the twigs for brushing her teeth. This was her cosmetic. That there is nothing beyond that in her life. And she has attended 11, 12 days Vipassana camp. And I said, she's speaking Marathi, somehow I struggled. I asked her, what was your motivation? She said, it has come from within. She didn't give me any other reason. She said, it just came from within and I'm here. So it is really stunning that that person has got a spiritual quest. What is her background? If you go in depth, maybe there's nothing. Maybe she's living in a thatched house, no property, no money, nothing. She's just come. And then she's asking me, how much donation are you giving? I said, I haven't decided, because I didn't want to say any number. She said, I am going to give 10 rupees. And she put those 10 rupees in front of me in the box. So you can quite imagine that there is actually no definition of who, in whom the spiritual quest can come in. It can come and can be fully matured.